The maid didn't scream when she saw the powder. She simply stopped polishing the silver cake knife, looked at the woman standing alone beside the enormous wedding cake, and watched as a small white packet disappeared into an elegant clutch purse. The woman glanced over her shoulder, smiled as if nothing had happened, and walked away before anyone noticed. For almost 30 seconds, Maria Holt couldn't move. She had worked in luxury hotels for nearly 11 years, and she knew the difference between an accident and something done on purpose. Welcome to Digital Story Corner. In today's video, we're telling the story of a hotel maid who noticed something no one else was watching for, and the impossible decision she had to make before a groom took his first bite of wedding cake. The wedding planner called her name from across the ballroom. "Mia, can you finish setting the dessert table?" She forced herself to nod. The ballroom inside Ashcroft Manor overlooked Lake Geneva. Outside, light rain tapped softly against the tall windows while guests arrived beneath white umbrellas. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors, and a string quartet quietly rehearsed near the staircase. Everything looked perfect. That was exactly what frightened her. Maria wasn't the kind of person who imagined conspiracies. At 32, she lived in a small apartment with her widowed father on the east side of the city. Every morning she caught the 5:40 train, packed her own lunch, and worked double shifts whenever someone called in sick. Her father needed expensive medication for his heart. She needed every paycheck. She had promised herself years ago that she would never risk her job over assumptions. But she couldn't forget what she'd seen. The bride wasn't really a bride yet. Her name was Celeste Vaughn, a successful art consultant whose face had appeared in magazines for months after becoming engaged to billionaire technology investor Rowan Ashcroft. Rowan rarely gave interviews. People described him as serious, polite, almost painfully private. While business magazines celebrated his investments, hotel staff talked about something else entirely. He always remembered names. Earlier that morning, he had thanked every server personally. When Maria accidentally dropped a tray during rehearsal, Rowan had quietly helped pick up the broken glasses instead of complaining. "It's only glass," he told her. His fiancée hadn't reacted the same way. Celeste had sighed loudly. "Can we please hire professionals next time?" Nobody answered. Everyone pretended not to hear. Maria remembered lowering her eyes, embarrassed more for Rowan than for herself. Now she looked toward the wedding cake again. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, fresh white roses woven around each layer, the pastry team having spent almost 2 full days decorating it. Executive pastry chef Nolan Pierce approached, carrying another tray. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "It is." "You look pale." "I'm fine." She wasn't. Every few minutes, she caught herself staring toward the cake. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe the packet contained edible glitter. Maybe it was sugar. Maybe she was about to ruin the happiest day of 2 people's lives over one strange moment. Then she remembered something else. When Celeste slipped the packet into her purse, she hadn't looked proud. She had looked nervous. That expression stayed with Maria. Guests filled the ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked. Photographers hurried from corner to corner while musicians began playing. Everything moved according to schedule. Only Maria seemed frozen in place. During dinner service, she noticed Celeste barely touched her food, checking her phone constantly, disappearing outside twice, once arguing quietly with someone near the garden entrance. Maria couldn't hear the words, only catching one sentence. "It has to happen tonight." The wind carried the rest away. Her stomach tightened. She considered telling hotel security, but what exactly would she say? "I saw someone near a cake." That wasn't evidence. It sounded ridiculous. Meanwhile, Chef Nolan gathered the dessert staff. "In 15 minutes, we'll move the cake." Everyone nodded. It would be rolled into the center of the ballroom, and Rowan and Celeste would cut the first slice together. Maria suddenly realized something. If there really was poison, the first bite would almost certainly belong to Rowan, not Celeste. Her breathing became uneven. She slipped into the staff hallway and called her father. He answered after 3 rings. "You working late again?" "Yeah." "You sound tired." "I just needed to hear your voice." He laughed gently. "You always overthink things." "I know. Whatever's bothering you, do the honest thing. You sleep better that way." Simple words, nothing dramatic. yet they settled somewhere deep inside her. She ended the call. When she returned, dessert service had already begun. The ballroom lights dimmed. Applause echoed across the room as the enormous cake rolled toward the center. Everyone stood. The quartet began playing. Rowan took Celeste's hand. She smiled beautifully for the cameras, effortless, almost rehearsed. Maria watched from behind the dessert station, noticing something nobody else seemed to see. Celeste kept encouraging Rowan to take the first bite. "You first," she whispered. He smiled. "Ladies first." "No," she insisted softly. "You deserve it." Her voice sounded sweet. Her eyes did not. Rowan laughed. "I insist." For one brief second, Celeste's smile disappeared, only for a heartbeat, then returned. That tiny moment erased the last of Maria's doubts. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She hurried toward Chef Nolan. "I need to tell you something. We're busy. It's important. Later. There may be something in the cake." He stared at her. "What?" Before she could finish, the wedding coordinator interrupted. "Maria, more champagne." People were everywhere. Music grew louder. Photographers crowded around the couple. No one was listening. Rowan accepted the silver cake knife. Guests raised their phones. The first slice was ready. Maria felt panic rising in her chest. She tried reaching security. Too late. She called out. Nobody heard. The applause swallowed her voice. Then she saw Rowan lifting a fork. Instinct took over. She ran. Guests turned as Maria rushed through the crowd. Someone shouted. Another person tried stopping her. She didn't slow down. She reached the table a second before Rowan tasted the cake, and with one powerful movement, grabbed Celeste by the wrist. The fork fell. Gasps filled the ballroom. Before anyone understood what was happening, Maria shoved Celeste forward, forcing her face directly into the massive wedding cake. Cream exploded across the table. Flowers scattered onto the floor. Silence replaced the music. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Celeste struggled to stand, covered in frosting and berries, screaming in disbelief. Security rushed forward. Several guests shouted at Maria. One woman yelled, "Have you lost your mind?" Rowan stared at the destroyed cake, then at the maid standing between him and what had been his first bite. Maria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely speak. Finally, she managed only 6 words. "Don't let anyone eat it." The ballroom fell completely still except for Celeste's angry breathing, cream dripping from her hair onto the polished marble floor. 2 security guards stepped toward Maria. "I didn't do this to embarrass her," she said, voice trembling. "Please don't let anyone eat that cake." "What are you talking about?" "I think someone put something in it." The words spread through the room faster than the music ever had. Someone whispered, "Poison." Another guest laughed nervously. "This has to be a misunderstanding." Celeste wiped frosting from her face and pointed directly at Maria. "She's insane. Arrest her. She attacked me in front of everyone." Her voice was sharp now, the calm smile she'd worn all evening completely gone. Rowan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Maria, remembering the quiet woman who had apologized earlier after dropping a tray. She wasn't looking proud or satisfied. She looked frightened, not of losing her job, but frightened that someone might get hurt. "What exactly did you see?" Rowan asked calmly. Maria swallowed. "About an hour before dinner, I saw Miss Vaughn near the cake. She poured something onto it from a small white packet. I wasn't sure what it was. I hoped I was wrong." Celeste laughed loudly. "Edible sugar. I was decorating it." Chef Nolan immediately shook his head. "No one was allowed to decorate the cake except my team." Several pastry assistants quietly nodded. Celeste's expression changed for only a second. That second was enough. Rowan turned toward hotel security. "Nobody touches the cake." One guard carefully blocked the dessert table while another contacted local police. The hotel manager apologized repeatedly to the guests, asking everyone to remain inside the ballroom until the situation became clear. 20 minutes later, 2 detectives arrived along with emergency medical staff. One detective listened carefully while Maria repeated exactly what she had seen, admitting the parts she wasn't certain about. "I don't know what the powder was," she said honestly. "I only know what I saw." The detective appreciated that answer more than any dramatic accusation would have. Another officer requested permission to inspect Celeste's evening bag. She crossed her arms. That's ridiculous. Rowan looked at her. If there's nothing inside, then this ends quickly. She hesitated only a moment, then handed over the purse. Inside were lipstick, perfume, tissues, and an empty white packet folded neatly beneath a compact mirror. The detective carefully sealed it into an evidence bag. Samples from the cake and the packet were sent immediately to the state laboratory. Hours passed. Many guests quietly left the reception. Maria sat alone in a small conference room with a cup of untouched coffee, unable to stop thinking about her father. If she had been wrong, her career would be over. No luxury hotel would ever hire her again. The hotel manager finally entered. "I've worked here 23 years, he said quietly. "I've never seen a wedding inn like this." He looked at her for a long moment. "You may have destroyed a cake, or you may have saved a life." Just after midnight, the detective returned, his face far more serious than before. The preliminary test had found a dangerous pesticide compound in both the packet residue and the frosting from the top layer of the cake. Nobody spoke. It was concentrated enough to cause severe poisoning if consumed, the detective continued. The hotel manager slowly sat down. Rowan closed his eyes, not dramatically, just quietly, as if trying to understand how close he had come to taking that first bite. Officers informed Celeste she was being detained. She insisted someone had planted the evidence, claiming Maria had framed her, but investigators soon uncovered something else. Financial records showed Celeste had accumulated enormous gambling debts over the previous 2 years, several payments hidden through shell companies. She had also recently purchased a large life insurance policy that would become effective immediately after the marriage. The investigation took several months. Detectives discovered messages between Celeste and a man who had illegally supplied toxic agricultural chemicals. The evidence painted a painful picture. She had planned to make Rowan's death appear to be a sudden allergic reaction during the reception. In the confusion, very few people would have questioned the cake. Instead, a maid who trusted her instincts had interrupted everything. When the criminal case finally ended the following spring, Maria never attended a single hearing. She didn't enjoy watching another person's life fall apart. She simply wanted to return to work. But life had already changed in quieter ways. Her father recovered well after surgery, not because someone handed them millions of dollars, but because the hotel staff quietly organized a fundraiser after learning about his medical bills. Some donated $50. Some gave $20. One dishwasher who could barely afford rent placed $10 into the envelope and apologized that it wasn't more. Maria cried when she saw the names, not because of the amount, because kindness had come from ordinary people. Chef Nolan promoted her to banquet supervisor several months later. "It isn't because of that wedding," he explained. "It's because every person here trusts your judgment." That meant more to her than any public praise. As for Rowan, he stayed away from interviews for nearly a year. One rainy afternoon, he visited the hotel restaurant alone, and Maria almost didn't recognize him without cameras following behind. They sat near the window where customers watched boats crossing the lake. "I've been trying to think of the right thing to say," Rowan admitted. "There probably isn't one." She smiled gently. "You don't owe me anything. I owe you my life." She shook her head. "You owe it to yourself to keep choosing good people." Before leaving, Rowan handed the hotel manager an envelope containing enough money to establish an employee emergency assistance fund. The fund wasn't named after him, and it wasn't named after Maria either. The plaque simply read, "For those who quietly protect others when no one is watching." Maria smiled when she first saw it, thinking about the countless housekeepers, cooks, cleaners, gardeners, receptionists, and servers who noticed small things every day that others overlooked. Most of them would never appear in newspapers. Most would never become famous. Yet they kept places running through honesty and quiet responsibility. Months later, another wedding filled the same ballroom. Fresh flowers decorated the tables. A new cake stood proudly beneath the chandelier. As guests applauded the first slice, Maria watched from the side of the room. This time, she smiled without fear. Sometimes courage doesn't look loud. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary person making one impossible decision, because staying silent feels even harder. Life wasn't perfect afterward. Bills still arrived. Her father still had medical appointments. She still woke before sunrise for work. But every ordinary morning reminded her that honesty often asks for courage before it offers peace, and that the strongest people are not always the richest or the loudest. They are the ones who quietly choose to do the right thing, even when they have everything to lose. If this story moved you, subscribe to Digital Story Corner and hit the bell. A brand new story drops every single day.